Hello, my dear friend. Welcome. Wherever you are right now, I am glad you are here. The day is done. The world outside, with all its noise and its hurry, has finally begun to quiet down. And now, this time is for you. This space is for you. Perhaps you are nestled in your bed, feeling the familiar comfort of your own sanctuary. Take a moment to truly arrive in this space. Feel the weight of your body supported and held by the mattress beneath you. Notice the gentle pressure of the blanket resting upon you, a soft and steady presence. Allow your head to sink just a little deeper into the pillow, releasing any tension you might be holding in your neck. Let's take a slow, quiet breath together. Nothing forced, nothing rushed, just a gentle inhale, feeling the cool air enter, and a long, slow exhale, letting it all go. Let go of the conversations from today. Let go of the lists and the plans for tomorrow. They can wait. They will be there when you wake. But for now, they have no power here. This moment is a sheltered harbor, and you are safely at our anchor. Feel a sense of stillness begin to spread through you, starting from the very tips of your toes. A gentle, pleasant warmth slowly creeping upward. Feel it soothe your feet, releasing the memory of every step you took today. Allow that wave of calm to wash over your ankles and up into your calves. Let your legs grow heavy, wonderfully comfortably heavy. That feeling of peace continues to rise, relaxing your knees, your thighs, letting go of all the effort, all the movement. Just stillness, just rest. Feel your hips sink into the bed, releasing the core of your body to gravity, to comfort. You are safe. You are supported. There is nothing you need to do and nowhere you need to be except right here in this peaceful moment of repose and in this quiet space, in this growing stillness. I have a story for you. It is not a story that demands your attention. It is not a lesson that requires you to remember names or dates. Think of it instead as a hazy dream from a world long past. A story covered in the soft dust of centuries, its sharp edges worn smooth by time. We are simply here to brush away a little of that dust and to wonder at the strange and quiet shapes we find beneath. Tonight, our journey takes us back, far back. Through the mists of time, we will travel to a summer that unfolded over 500 years ago. The year is 1518. The place is a city of cobblestones and tall, timber-framed houses, a city nestled along the Rhine River called Strasbourg. In the city, during a particularly hot and difficult summer, a peculiar fever took hold of the people. It was a strange malady, a mysterious affliction. But this was not a fever that brought a cough or a chill or a rash. This was a fever that compelled people to dance, an epidemic of dancing. It sounds almost like something from a children's fairy tale, doesn't it? The kind of story where a mischievous sprite plays a magical flute and the villagers cannot help but move their feet. It feels unreal. How can a dance be a disease? How can a movement of joy become an instrument of suffering? But history, you see, is often far stranger, more complex, and more mysterious than any fiction we could ever invent. The world of 1518 operated on a different kind of logic. It was a world where faith and fear science and superstition were woven together in an intricate tapestry. Their understanding of the body of the mind of God and of the world around them was profoundly different from our own. What seemed logical to them might seem utterly bizarre to us, and what seems bizarre to us was for them a terrifying reality. So, tonight we will not look upon this story with judgment. We will not try to solve its riddle with the sharp tools of our modern minds. Instead, we will simply drift back and watch it unfold. We will walk the streets of this forgotten city and listen to the whispers on the wind. We will try to understand the air they breathed, the fears they held, and the strange, inexplicable force that took hold of their bodies and refused to let go. This is not a horror story. It is a story of human mystery, a quiet tragedy played out in slow, relentless motion. It is the story of the dancing plague. And as we begin, I want you to make a promise to yourself. Promise yourself that you will not try to stay awake. This story is a lullaby. It is a gentle current designed to carry you out into the peaceful ocean of sleep. If my voice begins to fade, becoming a distant murmuring sound, that is good. If the details of the story begin to melt and merge with your own dreams, that is wonderful. That means it has done its job. There is no conclusion you need to reach, no ending you must hear. Your only task is to rest. So allow your eyelids to feel heavy. If they are not already closed, let them gently drift shut now. And as they close, let the image of your room begin to soften. Let the walls become translucent, the ceiling fade into a dusky sky. Feel the very air around you change. It grows warmer, thicker, carrying scents from another time. Let us leave the world of electricity and quiet engines behind. Let us drift away from the hum of the refrigerator and the glow of the screen. In its place, let's imagine something new. Imagine the feeling of rough-hewn cobblestones beneath your feet, even as you lie perfectly still in your bed. Feel their uneven, stony texture. Imagine the scent of the air. It is a mixture of wood smoke from 1,000 chimneys, the earthy smell of the river, the faint sweet scent of hay from a passing cart, and perhaps the aroma of bread baking in a stone oven nearby. Imagine the sounds. They are different here. There are no sirens, no traffic. Instead, you hear the distant, rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. You hear the gentle creak of a wooden sign swinging in the breeze. You hear the murmur of voices in a language you may not understand, their tones rising and falling like a gentle song. And far away from the great cathedral that stands at the heart of the city, you hear a bell. It chimes the hour, a deep resonant sound that vibrates through the very stones of the street. An hour that has long since passed. You are here now, in Strasbourg, in the hot, dusty summer of 1518. The story has not yet begun. The city is still holding its breath, unaware of the strange dream that is about to befall it. And it all starts with a single woman, a woman named Frau Trophäa. Let the world you know continue to dissolve. Let the comfort of your bed become the anchor for this new reality. For now, you are someone else. You are Frau Trophäa. And it is a morning in mid-July. Feel the world through her senses. Your name is a simple, solid thing, but your life is a web of constant, quiet anxieties. Feel the dress you are wearing. It is made of coarse, undyed linen, the kind of fabric that is practical but never truly soft. It chafes slightly at your neck, and your wrists a constant low-level reminder of your station in life. It smells faintly of wood smoke soapwort and the endless work that clings to it. Your home is not a place of grand vistas or quiet solitude. It is a single, small room on a narrow, crowded street. The walls are timber-framed, filled with wattle and daub, and they seem to lean inward as if tired from holding up the weight of the centuries. The air inside is thick with the smells of life. There is the lingering scent of last night's meager stew, the earthy aroma of the damp dirt floor, and the slightly sour smell of the straw mattress tucked into the corner. A single small window, covered not with glass, but with a piece of oiled parchment, allows a sliver of muted milky light to enter, illuminating the swirling dust motes in the air. This small space is your entire world, a place to cook, to sleep, to worry. And there is so much to worry about. As you stand in the center of this room, you can feel the weight of these worries settling upon your shoulders, heavier than any cloak. The year has been cruel. The winter was long and bitingly cold, freezing the river solid and seeping into the very bones of the city. Then came the spring, but it brought no relief. The rains did not come. The sun beat down on the fields, cracking the earth and withering the young shoots of grain. Now, in the height of summer, the consequences are felt everywhere. The price of bread has risen again. You feel a familiar tightening knot in your stomach when you think of it. The loaf you bought yesterday was smaller, and the flour was grittier, likely mixed with things that were not grain to make it stretch further. You think of your husband, his face etched with a silent tension. You think of the future, a future that feels not like an open road, but like a tightening hallway with no doors. Your hands, as you look down at them, tell the story of your days. They are not soft. They are chapped and calloused from a lifetime of labor. From hauling buckets of water from the public, well the cold wood of the handle digging into your palms. From scrubbing laundry against the washboard by the riverbank until your knuckles were raw. From kneading dough, tending the small fire in the hearth, and mending the same worn clothes over and over again. These are the hands of a survivor, but survival, you are learning, is a form of exhaustion. Outside your small window, the city of Strasbourg sighs under the oppressive heat. It is a city of whispers. In the marketplace, in the shadowy alleyways, people talk. They talk of the failed harvest, of the sicknesses that have swept through the poorer quarters. They talk of God. They wonder what they have done to deserve His displeasure. Has their faith been weak? Have their sins been too great? The priests in the grand cathedral speak of repentance, of piety, of the wages of sin being death. But their words offer little comfort. They only add another layer to the fear that hangs over the city, as thick and stifling as the summer air itself. This fear is a constant companion. It is there when you wake in the pre-dawn chill, and it is there when you finally lay your weary body down at night. It is a fear of hunger, a fear of sickness, a fear of the unknown, a fear that the fragile order of your world is about to break. You stand there, Frau Trophea, in the dusty silence of your small home. The city murmurs outside. The sun continues its slow climb into the sky. It is just another ordinary day, filled with the same ordinary struggles. You are unaware that you are standing on a precipice. You do not know that your name will be written down in the annals of history. You do not know that in a few moments your body will betray you in the most public and peculiar way imaginable. You only know the heat, the dust, and the quiet crushing weight of your own small life. It does not begin with a thought. It does not begin with a decision. There is no moment where you, Frau Trophea, decide to dance. If you had a choice, you would choose to sit. You would choose to lean against the rough-hewn wall of your home and give in to the profound weariness that has settled deep in your bones. But you are no longer entirely in control. It starts as a feeling so small you almost dismiss it. A faint tremor, a twitch in the arch of your left foot. You shift your weight, pressing your foot firmly against the cool, packed earth floor, as if to pin the feeling down to make it stop. But it doesn't. The tremor continues, a tiny, persistent flutter, like a trapped moth beating its wings against your skin. Then your toes begin to move, unbidden. They curl and then they tap, a silent rhythmic tapping against the dirt. 1, 2, 3, 4. It is a rhythm that comes from nowhere, an unheard melody that only your nerves seem to register. You look down at your own foot with a sense of detached curiosity, as if it belongs to someone else. You will it to be still. You command it, but it does not obey. The movement spreads. It is a slow, creeping tide. From your foot, it flows up into your ankle, which begins to flex and rotate in a small, tight circle. A strange, involuntary energy pulses up your calf, causing the muscle to clench, and then release, clench, and then release. It feels less like a dance and more like a possession. A quiet, patient force is waking up inside your limbs, and it has its own agenda. Your other foot joins in. Now both are moving, lifting and falling, not in a graceful step, but in a clumsy, shuffling motion. Your knees begin to bend, dipping and rising, dipping and rising. Your hips begin to sway, a gentle rocking motion from side to side. It is a grotesque parody of a dance, a puppet's jig performed without a puppeteer. You hear no music. The only sounds in the small, dusty room are the soft scrape and scuff of your bare feet on the floor and the ragged sound of your own breathing, which is starting to quicken. And beneath that, the frantic, terrified drumming of your own heart. It beats a wild, panicked rhythm against your ribs, a counterpoint to the relentless, steady beat of your feet. The beam of sunlight slanting through the parchment window seems to grow brighter. It illuminates the air, turning the swirling dust motes into 1,000 tiny glittering diamonds. They dance in the light, spinning and floating in the still air. And as you watch them, a strange thought drifts through your mind. They are dancing with you. The whole world has been reduced to this small, silent room and this one inexplicable, unending movement. Your arms, which had been hanging limply at your sides, begin to lift. They feel heavy, as if you are moving them through the water. They rise and fall, not with grace, but with a jerky, mechanical motion. One shoulder shrugs, then the other. Your head begins to loll from side to side, your neck muscles unable to resist the strange current flowing through you. A part of your mind, the part that is still you, is screaming. It is a silent internal scream of confusion and terror. Stop. Please stop. I am tired. I want to rest. You try to force your legs to lock to stand still. You try to clench your fists and hold your arms rigid, but it is like fighting against a powerful river current. The harder you resist, the more relentless the force becomes. Your body is a ship that has lost its rudder, tossed about on a storm you cannot see or hear. You spin a slow, clumsy turn in the center of the room, then another and another. The walls of your small home seem to tilt and blur. The single beam of light smears into a bright streak. A wave of dizziness washes over you, but you do not fall. The dance will not let you fall. It holds you upright, a cruel and tireless partner. The minutes stretch into an hour. The hour stretches into 2. The sun crawls higher in the sky, and the heat in the room becomes stifling. Sweat begins to bead on your forehead, trickling down your temples and into your eyes, making them sting. It soaks the collar of your rough linen dress. Your muscles, already weary from a lifetime of labor, begin to burn with a deep aching fire. Your lungs gasp for air. Your throat is raw and dry. This is not joy. This is not celebration. This is torture. It is a silent, methodical dismantling of your will. Your body, the only thing you truly own in this world, has been commandeered. It is no longer your servant. It has become your warden. And the dance is your cell. A cell without walls. A cell made of endless repetitive motion. You do not know how long this will last. You do not know why it is happening. You only know the relentless rhythm, the burn in your thighs, the ache in your back, the pounding in your head, and the terrifying dawning realization that this might never ever stop. Your feet continue their shuffling, scraping conversation with the earth, a conversation with no words and no end in sight. The 4 walls of your small home can no longer contain the frantic energy that has seized you. The dance, this relentless puppeteer, seems to desire a larger stage. It propels you forward, one shuffling step at a time, towards the heavy wooden door. Your hand, moving with that same jerky autonomy, reaches for the iron latch. It feels cold against your warm, sweaty palm. The door groans open on its worn leather hinges, the sound a low, mournful complaint in the stillness. And then you are outside. The sudden sunlight is blinding. You squint your eyes, watering, but the dance does not allow you to shield your face. You step out onto the narrow, cobbled street. The stones are warm from the morning sun, and their uneven surfaces press into the soles of your bare feet. Sharp pebbles, smooth hollows, the grit of fine dust. You feel every texture, but you cannot stop to favor a tender spot. The dance is indifferent to your pain. It continues uninterrupted. Here in the open air, the sounds of Strasbourg are clearer. The distant rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer provides a strange metallic beat to your silent dance. A dog barks somewhere down the lane. The murmur of conversation from an open window drifts past your ears. For a moment, it is just another ordinary day in the city. Except for you. You are the anomaly. The one strange, discordant note in the city's familiar song. And people begin to notice. First, it is Frau Schmidt, your neighbor from across the way. Her face appears in her window, framed by dark wood. She is a woman who notices everything. You see her eyes, small and curious, fix upon you. A flicker of puzzlement crosses her features. Her head tilts. She might be thinking what has gotten into Frau Trophia. A little further down the street, a pair of children playing with a hoop stop their game. They stand motionless, the wooden hoop forgotten at their feet, their mouths slightly agape. They stare not with malice, but with the wide-eyed, unblinking curiosity of the very young. They have never seen a grown-up behave this way. The baker, a large man with flour dusting his eyebrows, emerges from his shop, wiping his hands on his apron. He sees you, and a slow smile spreads across his face. Perhaps he thinks you are celebrating some good news. A letter from a relative, a small windfall. In a city so burdened by hardship, any sign of joy is a welcome sight. He might even feel a touch of warmth, a brief moment of shared happiness for you. Even the blacksmith, whose hammering has been the city's heartbeat all morning, finally pauses. The rhythmic clang ceases, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. He stands in the dark doorway of his workshop, the orange glow of the forge behind him, his muscular arms crossed over his chest. He watches you, his expression unreadable. Initially, their reactions are born of simple curiosity. They see a woman dancing alone in the street on a hot July morning. It is strange, yes, but perhaps explainable. Maybe you have had a bit too much of the cheap, strong cider that flows so freely. Maybe you are overcome with a fit of religious fervor, dancing for the Lord. Or maybe you are simply a little mad. In a world full of hardship, a little madness is not so uncommon. But then they look closer. And this is the moment when everything changes. This is the moment when curiosity curdles into a quiet, creeping unease. They look past the flailing arms and the shuffling feet. They look at your face. And what they see there stops their smiles and stills their whispered judgments. Your face is a mask of exhaustion. Your skin is slick with sweat, caked with the dust of the street. Your hair has come loose from its bun, clinging in damp strands to your neck and forehead. Your lips are parted, but you are not smiling. You are gasping for air each breath a shallow, ragged effort, and then they look into your eyes. This is the part that will haunt them later when they are huddled in their homes, bolting their doors. Your eyes are open, but they are not seeing. They are not focused on the people watching you, not on the buildings, not on the sky. They are looking inward, or perhaps at nothing at all. They are vacant, utterly and terrifyingly empty. There is no joy in them. There is no madness. There is no religious ecstasy. There is only a profound, bottomless weariness. The look of a soul trapped inside a body that has become its own prison. The baker's smile fades. The blacksmith uncrosses his arms. Frau Schmidt pulls her head back from the window, her expression now one of fear. The children take a hesitant step backward, sensing that this is something they should not be watching. They realize this is not a dance, not in any way they understand. This is not a celebration. It is a spectacle of suffering. And in that moment, a new unspoken question hangs in the hot, still air of the street. Is it contagious? The sun, that great indifferent clock in the sky, continues its slow, relentless journey. It climbs to its peak directly overhead, beating down upon the city with a white, merciless heat. The cobblestones become too hot to stand on comfortably, but your feet do not stop. They continue their scuffing, scraping rhythm, blistering and bleeding. Now, leaving faint, dusty pink smudges on the gray stones. The shadows of the tall, timbered houses shrink, offering no refuge. The streets empty out as sensible people retreat indoors to escape the oppressive midday heat. The blacksmith's hammer is silent. The baker's shop is shuttered. The children have been called inside. The city holds its breath, waiting for the cool of the evening. But you remain. You are the only thing moving in the deserted street, a solitary, frantic figure in the shimmering heat haze. Your world has shrunk to the small circle of stone you occupy, spinning and shuffling, shuffling and spinning. Your thirst is an agony. Your throat feels like it is lined with sand. Your tongue is a dry, swollen thing in your mouth. You see the public well at the end of a street. You can almost smell the cool, damp stone, but you cannot reach it. The dance holds you in its invisible grip. The afternoon wears on. The shadows begin to lengthen again, stretching like long, dark fingers across the street. The sun loses its white-hot intensity, softening to a warm, golden glow. The air begins to cool, and life slowly returns to the city. Windows are opened. People emerge from their homes. But now, they give you a wide berth. They hurry past their eyes, averted as if looking at you for too long might draw them into your strange, terrible orbit. And then comes the evening. The sun dips below the rooftops, painting the sky in breathtaking strokes of orange, pink, and deep violet. It is a beautiful sunset, the kind that might normally make you pause and feel a moment of quiet awe, but you do not see it. Your eyes are fixed on the ground in front of you, on the endless repeating pattern your feet are tracing in the dust. The church bells ring for evening prayers, their deep, solemn tones rolling through the city. Doors are bolted. Shutters are closed. The warm yellow light of candles and lanterns begins to appear in the windows, small pockets of safety and peace in the growing darkness. The city settles down for the night, but you do not. The last of the light fades, and the street is plunged into darkness, broken only by the pale silvery light of a crescent moon. You are a silhouette now, a frantic shadow moving against the deeper shadows of the buildings. The air grows cool, and a chill begins to seep into your sweat-soaked dress, making you shiver. But the shivering is lost in the larger, more violent tremors of the dance. Your muscles are screaming. Every fiber of your being is a symphony of pain. Your joints ache with a fire that never subsides. Your mind is a fog of exhaustion and confusion. Thoughts no longer form coherent sentences. There are only flashes of images: your husband's face, the cool water of the river, the straw mattress in your home, the simple, profound pleasure of lying down, of being still. But stillness is a forgotten luxury, a distant, impossible dream. For now, there is only the moon above the hard stones below, and the dance, the endless, silent, merciless dance. The sun rose on the second day, casting its long, gentle fingers of light over the sleeping city of Strasbourg. It illuminated the steep tiled roofs and the quiet, empty streets. But one figure had not slept. Frau Trophea was still there, a lone kinetic silhouette in the pre-dawn gray. Her ordeal had continued through the night, a silent, solitary marathon of suffering. But she was no longer alone for long. As the city began to wake, so too did the strange affliction that held her captive. It did not happen all at once. It was a slow, creeping contagion, spreading not through touch or breath, but through some invisible, sympathetic channel. Across the city, in other narrow lanes and stuffy, single-room homes, the twitching began. It started with a man, a cobbler, who lived just a few streets away. He was sitting at his workbench, the scent of leather and wax thick in the air, a half-finished shoe held firmly in his hands. He felt a tremor in his fingers, causing him to drop his awl. He picked it up, annoyed, but then the tremor moved to his shoulder, a violent, involuntary shrug. He stood up, shaking his arm as if to rid it of a buzzing insect. But the shaking didn't stop. It spread to his legs, and soon he too was shuffling in a clumsy, uncoordinated circle, the forgotten shoe still clutched in his hand. Then a young woman, a laundress, was returning from the river, a heavy basket of damp linen balanced on her hip. As she walked, her gait became unsteady. It was not the unsteadiness of fatigue, but something different. A strange skipping quality entered her steps. The basket tilted, spilling the clean, wet clothes onto the dusty ground. She looked down at the mess with a flicker of distress, but she could not stop to pick them up. Her feet had a mind of their own, carrying her away in a series of hops and jerks, her arms flailing at her sides as if trying to find balance. It was as if an unheard melody, a silent ghostly tune, was sweeping through the city, audible only to the most vulnerable souls. Within the week, dozens of people had joined Frau Trophea's terrible dance. They came from every corner of the city, from every walk of life. The strange fever was unnervingly democratic. It did not discriminate. A tailor was seen stumbling out of his shop, a needle and thread still stuck in the lapel of the coat he was working on his hands, making stitching motions in the air as his legs carried him in a frantic jig. A stonemason, a man known for his immense strength and quiet demeanor, was seen twirling slowly in a marketplace, his powerful body moving with a bizarre, almost delicate lightness. A group of children who should have been chasing each other through the alleyways with shrieks of laughter were now moving with the same blank-eyed, repetitive motions as the adults. There was a fishwife, her face weathered by the sun, whose sharp, booming voice was now silent, replaced by the soft, rhythmic slap of her worn-out shoes on the cobblestones. There was a young clerk, his fingers still stained with ink, his body twitching as if he were being shocked by some invisible electricity. Rich merchants and poor laborers, pious matrons and ragged beggars, all were drawn into the silent, growing chorus of movement. The sight was profoundly unsettling, a violation of the natural order. This was not the joyous communal dancing of a village festival. There was no laughter, no music, no camaraderie. It was a deeply solitary affair, performed in public. Each person was lost in their own private ordeal, their bodies moving to the same relentless, inaudible beat, but their eyes seeing nothing but their own internal landscape of pain and confusion. They would often collide, bumping into one another with a dull thud, stumbling, and sometimes falling to the ground in a heap of tangled limbs. But there were no apologies, no curses, no helping hands offered. A fallen dancer would simply lie there for a moment, their bodies still twitching before struggling back to their feet as if pulled up by invisible strings to rejoin the ceaseless motion. For those who watched from the safety of their windows, It was a waking nightmare. They saw their neighbors, their friends, people they had known their entire lives transformed into mindless automatons. The familiar fabric of their community was unraveling before their very eyes, replaced by this eerie, silent, and ever-growing ballet of despair. The city was no longer just sick with hunger and fear. It was now sick with this inexplicable, kinetic madness. And the most terrifying question of all began to form in the minds of every onlooker. Who will be next? A city is a living thing. It has a rhythm, a pulse, a collection of sounds and smells that define its character. For Strasbourg in 1518, that rhythm was the rhythm of work. It was the early morning clatter of wooden shutters being thrown open, the call of the street vendors hawking their wares, the steady, reassuring thud of the blacksmith's hammer, the rumble of cartwheels on stone, and the murmur of 1,000 conversations in the bustling marketplace. It was the smell of baking bread, of tanning leather, of fish from the river, and of wood smoke hanging in the air. But as the dancing fever spread, this familiar pulse began to weaken. The city's heartbeat grew faint, replaced by a new, more sinister rhythm, the incessant shuffling, scraping sound of the dancers' feet. Fear is a powerful anesthetic, and it was fear that began to paralyze Strasbourg. The open communal life of the medieval city began to shrink, to turn inward. People who had once lived their lives in public, working, trading, gossiping, and praying together now retreated into the shadows of their homes. Doors that were once left open to catch the summer breeze were now bolted shut day and night. The marketplace, usually the vibrant, chaotic heart of the city, grew quiet. The stalls, once overflowing with what little produce could be found, were now sparsely attended or left completely empty. Who would dare to stand for hours selling their goods when the very air seemed to carry the seeds of this kinetic madness? The few shoppers who did venture out moved quickly, their heads down, their eyes darting nervously towards the growing crowds of dancers before scurrying back to the safety of their homes. The daily sounds of commerce and craft began to fade into an eerie silence. The rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer, that sound which had marked the hours of the day for generations, was now heard only intermittently before falling silent altogether. The blacksmith, like everyone else, was too afraid to stand in his open workshop, a prime target for the strange affliction. The cheerful whir of the spinner's wheel, the steady scrape of the carpenter's plane, the loud, boisterous haggling at the weaver's guild, all of it dwindled, replaced by a heavy, watchful quiet. Even the most fundamental sense of the city began to change. The warm, comforting aroma of bread, baking in the communal ovens, a smell that had always meant sustenance and community, no longer wafted through the streets. The bakeries were closed. The fires had gone cold. In its place, a new scent began to dominate the air. It was the sour, pungent smell of unwashed bodies, of stale sweat, of the dust kicked up by 100 pairs of restless feet. It was the smell of exhaustion and fear. Life contracted. The world for the healthy became the size of a single room, a single bolted door. Mothers pulled their children in from the streets, hushing them with fearful whispers, telling them not to look out the windows. Men who should have been in the fields or at their workshops now sat in the dim light of their homes, their hands idle, their minds racing. What was this? Was it a curse from a witch? A divine punishment? A new form of the plague? Without answers, the only recourse was to hide. The city, in effect, was holding its breath. The normal flow of life, of work, of trade, of social interaction had been suspended. All that remained was the spectacle. The healthy watched in secret, peering through cracks in their shutters, their hearts pounding with a mixture of pity and terror. And the afflicted danced on, oblivious to the paralysis they were causing. They were the city's new terrible pulse. Their endless shuffling footsteps were the only rhythm left in a city that had lost its own. The air, once thick with the sounds and smells of life, was now thick with something else entirely, a silent collective and suffocating dread. Let us shift our perspective now. Let us step out of the frantic motion and into the terrified stillness. You are no longer one of the dancers. You are one of the watchers. Imagine yourself standing just inside the doorway of your home. The heavy oak door is pulled mostly shut, leaving only a narrow vertical slit of light. It is just enough to see, but you hope not enough to be seen. Your hand rests on the cold, rough wood of the door, and you can feel your own knuckles are white, your grip tight with tension. You are peering out into the main square of the city. The sun is high and hot, bleaching the color from the sky. The square, which should be a riot of activity, is a stage for this strange, unfolding drama. And on that stage, you see the faces of your world contorted into masks of suffering. There is Herr Gruber, the butcher, a man so large and full of life, you've often heard his booming laugh from 2 streets away. His laugh is gone now. He moves with a heavy, lumbering gait, his great arms swinging uselessly at his sides. His face, usually ruddy and cheerful, is a pasty grayish color. His eyes, which were always so quick to wink or smile, are now dull and unfocused, staring at some point in the middle distance that no one else can see. And over there, near the public fountain, is little Elsbeth. She is the baker's daughter, a girl of no more than 7, with bright ribbons in her braided hair. You have seen her 100 times chasing pigeons in this very square, her small feet a blur of joyful energy. She is still a blur of energy, but the joy is gone. Her ribbons are askew. Her face is streaked with dirt and tears. She hops from one foot to the other, a grotesque imitation of a child's game. A soft, whimpering sound escaping her chapped lips with every movement. You see people you have known your whole life. The woman who sells you vegetables, whose hands are as gnarled as the carrots she pulls from the earth. The young apprentice from the weaver's shop who always had a shy smile for you. The old man who sits mending fishing nets by the river. They are all here, a community of familiar faces, all estranged from themselves, all caught in the same invisible net. A profound sense of helplessness washes over you. It is a physical thing, a cold weight in your stomach. You want to do something. The instinct is overwhelming. You see Elsbeth stumble, and you want to rush out and catch her. You see Herr Gruber's parched lips, and you want to run to the fountain, fill a cup with cool water, and press it to his mouth. You want to grab them by the shoulders, shake them, and shout, "Stop! Just stop! Come inside and rest." But you do not move. Your feet feel as though they are nailed to the floor. An invisible barrier stands between your world of quiet safety and their world of kinetic chaos. It is a barrier made of fear. What if you step out there and it takes you too? What if this strange wind blows through the doorway and sets your own feet to dancing? The fear is not just for yourself, but for your family huddled in the back of the room behind you. Your duty is to them. Your duty is to keep this door closed. And so you watch. You become a silent, guilty witness. You begin to listen more closely, past the ever-present shuffling and scraping of feet on stone, and you start to hear the other sounds, the human sounds, the sounds that are almost swallowed by the larger spectacle, but are infinitely more heartbreaking. You hear a low, guttural moaning, the sound a person makes when their body is in so much pain that language fails them. You hear a sharp, sudden cry as someone's ankle twists, followed by the dull thud of their body hitting the cobblestones. You hear the sound of weeping, not loud, dramatic sobbing, but a quiet, exhausted, continuous crying. It is the sound of absolute despair, the sound of a spirit that is already broken, even as the body is forced to carry on. And perhaps worst of all, you sometimes hear a sudden, sharp, hysterical laugh. It rings out high and unnatural before being cut short by a gasp for breath. It is not the sound of mirth. It is the sound of a mind that is fractured under the strain. Each sound is a small, sharp dagger to your heart. These are not monsters. They are not demons. They are your people. And they are suffering in plain sight while you and everyone else hide in the shadows, paralyzed by a fear as crippling as the dance itself. You press your forehead against the cool, wood of the door, and you close your eyes, but you cannot shut out the sounds, the soft, terrible music of a city in agony. The human body is a miracle of endurance, but it is not infinite. It has limits. And after days of relentless, uninterrupted motion, without food, without water, without a single moment of rest, the bodies of the first dancers began to reach those limits. The end did not come with a dramatic flourish. It was quiet, mundane, and all the more terrible for it. It happened to an old man, a weaver, whose hands were stained with the colors of his trade. He had been dancing for what felt like an eternity, his movements growing slower, more feeble with each passing hour. His shuffling steps had become a barely perceptible drag. His arms, which had once flailed, now hung limply at his sides. And then, in the middle of a slow, agonizing turn, he simply stopped. His body swayed for a moment like a tree in a gentle breeze. His knees buckled not with a sudden crash, but with a slow, gentle folding. He crumpled to the ground, landing in a soft, still heap on the dusty cobblestones. There was no cry, no final gasp. It was as if a candle flame, having consumed all its wax, had simply been extinguished by a passing breath. His heart, strained beyond its capacity, had given its last tired beat. The other dancers, lost in their own private worlds of torment, seemed not to notice. They continued their endless circuits, their shuffling feet moving around his still form as if he were just another obstacle, another stone in the street. For a moment, there was a small sacred space of stillness in the midst of the chaos. Then the dance closed in, and he was just part of the landscape of the nightmare. A few hours later, it was a young woman. Her body pushed to the edge of dehydration, and exhaustion was racked by a violent spasm. She cried out a short, sharp sound of surprise and pain before collapsing. Her dance was over, and so it went. One by one, the weakest, the oldest, the most frail began to fall. They succumbed to heart attacks, to strokes, to sheer absolute exhaustion. Their bodies simply could not provide the fuel that the strange, tyrannical fever demanded. They were the first casualties of this silent kinetic war. There were no funerals. There were no grieving families rushing to their sides. The fear in the city was now so profound that the dead were left where they fell, at least for a time. They lay in the sun, silent monuments to the plague's terrifying power. Their stillness was a stark, shocking contrast to the frantic motion that continued all around them. For those watching from their hidden vantage points, each fall was a fresh wave of horror. They were witnessing death in its most public and yet most lonely form. There was no dignity, no final words, no comfort, just a body giving up a life, sputtering out in the middle of a crowded square, completely and utterly alone. As the sun began to set on another day of this waking dream, the city of Strasbourg was changing. The initial fear and confusion were hardening into a kind of grim collective trauma. The air was thick with it. The silence was heavy with it. The city was no longer just paralyzed. It was sinking into a deep shared nightmare, from which there seemed to be no awakening. The rhythm of the shuffling feet was the only lullaby, a terrible, monotonous song that promised not sleep, but a final, exhausted peace. The dance continued, but now it was a dance of attrition, a dance of death. In any time of crisis, the people look to their leaders. They look for answers, for action, for reassurance. And the leaders of Strasbourg, the wealthy guildmasters, the magistrates, and the city's elite knew they had to do something. The city was bleeding. Its commerce was at a standstill. Its people were terrified, and a growing number of its citizens were quite literally dancing themselves to death in the public squares. The situation was untenable, and so they gathered. Let us imagine ourselves now, not in the hot, dusty street, but within the cool stone walls of the city's town hall. Picture a long, dark, wood-paneled room. The air is cool and still smelling of old wood beeswax and the faint, dusty scent of aging documents. A single, massive table, crafted from ancient oak, dominates the space. It is a table that has seen generations of city business, a silent witness to countless debates over taxes, laws, and wars. Around this table sit the most powerful men in Strasbourg. They are dressed in dark, heavy velvets and furs, despite the summer heat, a visual display of their status. Their faces, illuminated by the flickering, unsteady light of a dozen beeswax candles, are etched with worry. There is the stern-faced magistrate, the portly guild leader, the city's chief physician. They are men of logic, men of order, men of commerce. And they are confronted with a problem that defies all three. The shuffling sound of the dancers in the square below is a faint, maddeningly persistent whisper that seeps through the thick stone walls, a constant reminder of the chaos they are meant to control. The meeting begins. Voices are low-hushed. They review the facts as they know them. It began with one woman, Frau Trophea. Now, the number of afflicted is well over 100, and it is growing daily. They are not eating. They are not drinking. They are not sleeping, and they are beginning to die. The first question, of course, is, what is this? Is it supernatural? A divine punishment? A demonic curse? The local bishop is consulted. He speaks of sin, of the weakness of the flesh, of the possibility of diabolical influence. He recommends a course of prayer, fasting, and public penance. But the city council, being practical men, also looks to the world of medicine. They summon the city's most esteemed physicians. These are men of learning, men who have studied the ancient texts of Galen and Hippocrates. They arrive with their serious expressions and their theories. Let us listen in on their diagnosis spoken in the confident academic tones of the age. After observing the dancers, they dismiss the notion of supernatural causes. This is not, they declare, a matter for the priests, but for physicians. The problem, they explain, is a natural one. It is a disease caused by an imbalance in the body's humors. Specifically, they diagnose it as a case of hot blood. Imagine them explaining this theory. The human body, they would say, contains 4 humors: blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. A healthy person has these 4 fluids in perfect balance. But in these dancers, the blood has become overheated, agitated. This excess of hot blood is affecting their brains, causing this frantic, involuntary motion. It is a logical conclusion based entirely on the scientific understanding of their time. The council members nod slowly, absorbing this information. It is in a way a relief. A natural disease, even a strange one, is something that can be treated. It is a problem that can be solved with a physical remedy, not just with prayer. And so, the crucial question is asked: what is the remedy for hot blood? The physicians have an answer. It is again based on their logical framework. If the body is suffering from an excess of something, in this case, an excess of kinetic heated energy, then the logical course of action is to let that excess run its course. One must burn the fever out. And this is where the conversation takes a turn that to our modern ears sounds like a descent into utter madness. A decision is reached. A consensus is formed among these serious, well-intentioned, and deeply worried men. They decide that to cure the dancers of their affliction, the dancers must be encouraged to dance even more. Let that sink in. Their cure for a plague of compulsive dancing was more dancing. They reasoned that if the dancers were given a dedicated space with professional musicians to provide a steady rhythm, they could dance the fever out. They could exhaust the hot blood, purge the disease from their systems through sheer, continuous, organized movement. The affliction would be sweated out, danced out, and finally cast out. It was a prescription, a medical treatment. And so, from this quiet, candle-lit room, an official proclamation was drafted. The city would not try to restrain the dancers. It would not try to soothe them. It would instead lean into the madness. It would provide the stage, the music, and the encouragement for this dance of death to reach its terrible, and they hoped, therapeutic conclusion. The city itself would become the physician, and its prescription was the very disease it sought to cure. The decision, once made, in the hushed candlelit chamber of the town hall was quickly put into action. Official orders, sealed with the city's wax crest, were dispatched. The full authority of the Strasbourg City Council was now behind this strange and desperate therapeutic experiment. The first sign of this new strategy appeared in the city's bustling guild halls. Messengers arrived, summoning the carpenters. These were men accustomed to building houses, to mending roofs, to crafting sturdy furniture. Now, they were given a new bizarre task. They were ordered to clear a space in one of the largest public areas, the grain market, and to construct a stage. And so, the sound of methodical hammering once again filled the city air. But this was not the sound of a city returning to normal. It was the sound of a city leaning into its own fever dream. Planks of raw, unfinished wood were carted into the square. Beams were hoisted into place. Slowly, over a day or two, a large elevated wooden platform took shape. It was the kind of stage one might expect to see built for a festival, a passion play, or the public address of a visiting nobleman. But this stage was being built for the sick. It was a clinical space, a therapeutic arena, built to host a dance of ghosts. Next, the city's musicians were summoned. These were the pipers, the drummers, and the fiddlers who made their living playing at weddings, at holiday feasts, and in noisy taverns. They were men whose trade was joy, whose craft was the creation of merriment. They arrived at the town hall, their instruments in hand, expecting perhaps to be hired for a nobleman's banquet. Instead, they were given the most surreal commission of their lives. They were to be the physician's assistants. Their music was to be the medicine. They were instructed to go to the newly built stage and to play. Not somber hymns or mournful dirges, but lively, upbeat, rhythmic tunes. The kind of music that makes feet tap and hearts lift. They were to play relentlessly from morning until night, to provide a steady driving beat that would in theory help the dancers purge the hot blood from their systems. And for this strange, grim work, they would be well paid from the city's coffers. And so, let us try to picture the scene that followed. A scene of such profound and tragic absurdity, it feels torn from a madman's vision. On the newly built wooden stage, the hired musicians take their places. A piper puts his instrument to his lips. A drummer tightens the skin of his drum. A lutenist plucks a string. They exchange nervous, uncertain glances. And then they begin to play. A lively, rollicking tune fills the square. It's a peasant's dancing song, a melody of harvest and celebration. The music is fast, cheerful, and infectious. It is music for spinning and laughing and drinking. But the audience for this music is not laughing. Before the stage, the afflicted citizens of Strasbourg continue their terrible involuntary ballet. They are herded into this open space, a writhing, twitching mass of humanity. Their bodies gaunt and filthy respond to the music. The driving rhythm seems to hook into the existing madness, giving it a new, more frantic structure. Their shuffling steps become more energetic. Their flailing arms become more wild. The contrast is dizzying, a waking nightmare set to a festive score. The cheerful, upbeat melody of the flute dances in the air, while below, on the ground, bodies are breaking down. The steady, joyous beat of the drum echoes through the square, a cruel counterpoint to the silent, agonized rhythm of hearts being pushed past their breaking point. Let's focus for a moment on the musicians themselves. Imagine being one of them. You are a professional. You play the notes as you are told, but you are not playing for a smiling bride or a group of happy revelers. You are looking out at a sea of blank, tormented faces. You see Herr Gruber, the butcher, his great body now stumbling in time to your fiddle. You see little Elsbeth, the baker's daughter, her small frame being jerked around by the lively tune you are piping. You are being paid to fuel their suffering. Your music is not a comfort. It is a whip driving them onward. With every note you play, you are pushing them closer to the edge of collapse. You can see the pain in their movements, the desperation in their gasping breaths. You see their bare feet, bloody and swollen, stomping on the hard ground in time with your drum beat. How must that have felt? To play a song of life for an audience that is actively dying? The guild pays you, the council orders you, but your own heart must be a cold, heavy stone in your chest. You play on because you must, but perhaps the notes begin to sound hollow to your own ears. The cheerful melody becomes a grotesque mocking shriek. You are a musician at a funeral, but you have been ordered to play a wedding jig. And so you play, and you watch, and you become a part of the city's waking musical nightmare. The city council's plan, born of the best medical logic their era could offer, was not just a failure. It was a catastrophe. Their well-intentioned therapeutic intervention acted not as a cure, but as gasoline on a fire. The effect of the music was the exact opposite of what the physicians had predicted. Instead of providing a structured outlet that would tire the dancers out, the lively, relentless rhythms seemed to energize them, to feed the very fever it was meant to extinguish. The dancers, who had been moving with a weary, shuffling gait, were now spurred into a more frenzied, more dangerous level of activity. Their movements became wilder, their jerks more violent. The scene in the grain market ceased to look like a strange outdoor infirmary. It began to resemble a macabre festival, a carnival of the damned, a grand ball hosted by death itself. And worse, much worse, the spectacle began to draw people in. The music echoing through the narrow stone-lined streets was a powerful lure. It was a sound of life in a city that had been paralyzed by fear. And people drawn by a morbid curiosity, they could not resist began to creep out of their homes. They came to watch. They stood at the edges of the square, a growing crowd of silent onlookers, their faces a mixture of horror and fascination. They intended only to be spectators, but the combination of the driving, repetitive music and the hypnotic, kinetic sight of the writhing dancers had a strange, powerful, psychological effect. The boundary between watcher and participant began to blur. It would start with a foot tapping unconsciously in time with the drummer's beat, then a slight swaying of the hips. A man standing in the crowd might suddenly feel an uncontrollable urge to shrug his shoulders, to twitch his arms. He would try to fight it to stand still, his face pale with a sudden dawning terror. But the impulse was too strong, and soon he too would stumble forward, his body no longer his own, and be swallowed by the frenetic, swirling mass of dancers. One by one, healthy onlookers who had come only to witness the tragedy became a part of it. The fever was not just an internal malady. It seemed to be contagious by sight and sound, a psychic contagion that leaped from the afflicted to the well. The number of dancers swelled from just over 100 to several hundred. The square was now a teeming, chaotic sea of twisting bodies. The death toll began to rise at an alarming rate. Under the hot July sun, spurred on by the relentless music, dozens more collapsed from strokes, heart attacks, and pure catastrophic exhaustion. The leaders of Strasbourg watched in horror as their grand cure became a grand accelerator of death. The stage they had built was a platform for a tragedy. The music they had paid for was a funeral dirge disguised as a jig. They had taken a crisis and, with the best of intentions and the worst of results, turned it into a full-blown disaster. The realization finally dawned. Their logic was flawed. Their science was wrong. This was not working. The order was given this time with a sense of quiet panic. The experiment was over. The carpenters were summoned once more, not to build, but to dismantle. The great wooden stage was taken down plank by plank. Its purpose, a failure. The exhausted and terrified musicians were dismissed, their wages paid, their instruments silenced. They likely fled the square, haunted by the faces they had played for the cheerful notes of their songs, now forever tainted by the memory of what they had witnessed. Once again, a strange, heavy silence fell over the square, a silence broken only by the ragged breathing of the dancers and the soft, terrible shuffling of their feet. The city's official medical solution had failed, and in the vacuum left by the failure of reason, only one explanation seemed to remain. When the logic of men fails, they turn to the logic of God. Having exhausted their medical options with such disastrous results, the city's leaders and physicians re-evaluated their initial diagnosis. This could not be a simple case of hot blood. The scale of the tragedy, its resistance to their cure, its terrifying ability to spread to onlookers, all of it pointed to a cause that was not of the natural world. They returned to the bishop's initial theory. This had to be a supernatural affliction, a divine curse. Their focus now shifted to identifying the source of this celestial anger. And in the rich folklore and religious beliefs of the time, there was a candidate. Saint Vitus. He was a saint known, among other things, to be connected with dancing and with neurological afflictions. It was believed that if one angered Saint Vitus, he could inflict a terrible compulsive dance upon the offender as a punishment. The conclusion seemed inescapable. The people of Strasbourg had somehow incurred the wrath of Saint Vitus, and this plague was their penance. With this new diagnosis came a new and final plan for a cure. If the problem was spiritual, then the solution must be spiritual as well. The dancers did not need music, they needed absolution. They did not need a stage, they needed a shrine. The new order was given. The remaining dancers, now numbering in the hundreds, were to be gathered up. This was no gentle persuasion. City guards and healthy volunteers rounded them up, their bodies weak and unresisting, and loaded them onto wagons and carts. Imagine this procession. A long, slow train of open-topped wagons filled with the gaunt, twitching, and moaning citizens of your city. It is not a parade of triumph, but a pilgrimage of the damned. The wagons rumble slowly out of the city gates, leaving the quiet, terrified streets of Strasbourg behind. Their destination was a shrine located several miles away, high up in the mountains. It was a place dedicated to Saint Vitus. The hope was that by bringing the afflicted directly to the saint's holy place, by having them pray, by making offerings, and by showing their contrition, the saint's anger might be appeased. The curse might be lifted. And so, the strange, tragic caravan made its slow, painful journey up the winding mountain roads. The dancers, even in the wagons, could not find rest. Their bodies continued to jerk and twitch. The healthy drove them onward, their hearts filled with a desperate last-ditch hope that this spiritual remedy would succeed where their worldly one had failed so miserably. The chapter of the city's official response was closing. They had tried reason. They had tried music. Now they were trying faith. They had sent their sick and suffering away up into the mountains to a holy shrine in a final desperate appeal to an angry saint. And as the last wagon disappeared from view, a heavy, uncertain silence settled over Strasbourg. All they could do now was wait and pray. The strange fever in Strasbourg eventually faded. The dancing stopped. The city slowly, painfully began to heal, though it would forever carry the scar of that terrible summer. For centuries, the story was told and retold, a bizarre historical footnote a cautionary tale about the wrath of Saint Vitus. The explanation of an angry saint was for a very long time the only explanation there was. But let us leave the world of 1518 behind now. Let us travel forward in time into our own age. An age of science, of microbiology, of psychology. Let us sit in a quiet, comfortable room, far from the fear and superstition of the past, and look back at this mystery through a new lens. With the benefit of hindsight and modern knowledge, historians and scientists have revisited the dancing plague, searching for a more worldly explanation. And the first suspect they identified was a tiny, insidious, and powerful culprit. A fungus. Imagine, if you will, the fields of rye that surrounded Strasbourg. Rye was the grain of the common people. It was hardy, it could grow in poor soil, and it was the primary ingredient in the dark, dense bread that sustained the population. But sometimes, in damp, cool weather, a small, dark, purplish growth would appear on the heads of the rye grain. It looked a bit like a rooster's spur, and so it came to be called ergot. The peasants of the time would have seen it. They might have thought it was just a part of the plant, or perhaps a sign of blight. They would have harvested the grain ergot and all and ground it into flour. The dark color of the fungus would have been invisible in the dark rye flour, and the bread baked from this flour would have been eaten by hundreds, if not thousands of people. What they did not know, what they could not have known, was that they were consuming a powerful, naturally occurring poison. The ergot fungus contains psychoactive alkaloids. In fact, the substance from which the hallucinogenic drug LSD was first synthesized is derived from this very fungus. To eat bread tainted with ergot was to ingest a potent neurotoxin. The condition caused by this poisoning is known today as ergotism, and its symptoms are a terrifying match for some of the descriptions from 1518. Ergotism can cause vivid hallucination, agonizing muscle spasms, and violent convulsive seizures. It can also create a burning sensation in the limbs, a feeling so intense it was historically known as St. Anthony's fire. Sufferers would feel as if their hands and feet were literally on fire, a torment that could easily drive a person to frantic, desperate movement. So, here we have a plausible, scientific explanation. A community already stressed by famine and disease consumes tainted rye bread. The poison in the fungus attacks their central nervous systems, causing them to twitch, to spasm, to hallucinate. Their movements might not have been a true dance, but rather a series of uncontrollable, convulsive fits that to an outside observer looked like a bizarre, jerky dance. It seems to fit. A natural cause for a seemingly supernatural event. But like a thread that frays at the end, this theory, upon closer examination, begins to unravel. There are problems with the ergotism hypothesis. While the fungus does cause spasms, it also often leads to gangrene, cutting off blood flow to the extremities, making coordinated movement, let alone continuous dancing for days on end, nearly impossible. The victim's limbs would more likely have turned black and numb than have carried them in a frantic jig. Furthermore, historical records of ergotism outbreaks often describe the victims writhing on the ground in agony, not dancing in the streets. The sheer stamina required to dance for days without rest seems inconsistent with the debilitating effects of a powerful poison. And perhaps most tellingly, the records from Strasbourg are very specific. They describe dancing. They do not describe the other common symptoms of ergotism, like the gangrene or the digestive distress that usually accompanies poisoning. Would the city's chroniclers have failed to mention such dramatic and obvious symptoms? So while the ergot fungus lurking in the daily bread of the poor is a compelling and chilling possibility, it can on its own seem to account for the full, bizarre picture of the dancing plague. The theory is a piece of the puzzle perhaps, but it is not the whole solution. The shadow of ergot falls across the events of 1518, but it does not fully illuminate them. The mystery remains, and we must turn another page and look for another clue. If the answer to the mystery does not lie in the body's poison, then perhaps it lies in the mind's distress. This brings us to the second and most widely accepted theory among modern historians. It is a theory that has no single physical culprit, no fungus, no virus. The cause it suggests was something far more intangible, and in some ways, far more powerful, a shared unbearable stress. To understand this, we must once again let our minds drift back to the world of 1518. Let us try to truly feel the psychological atmosphere of that time. Life for the common person in Strasbourg was not just hard, it was precarious in a way that is difficult for us to imagine. They lived on a knife's edge, where a single failed harvest, a single harsh winter could mean the difference between life and starvation. And the years leading up to 1518 had been particularly brutal. They had suffered through famine. They had endured wave after wave of disease, including leprosy and the dreaded syphilis, which was a new and terrifying scourge in Europe. Their world was steeped in a deep, pervasive, and entirely justified fear. On top of this physical hardship was a profound spiritual anxiety. The authority of the church was absolute, and the fear of God's wrath and eternal damnation was a real, tangible presence in daily life. Every misfortune, a sick child, a poor crop, a sudden storm, could be interpreted as a sign of divine displeasure. The people felt themselves to be powerless, tossed about by forces far beyond their control, both on earth and in the heavens. Now, imagine living in this state of chronic high-level stress. Your body is weak from hunger. Your mind is saturated with fear and superstition. You feel trapped, helpless, with no outlet for your anxiety, no way to escape the crushing weight of your reality. This is the fertile ground in which a phenomenon known to psychologists as mass psychogenic illness can take root. Sometimes it is called mass hysteria. It is a condition where a group of people all sharing the same extreme psychological stress begin to manifest the same physical symptoms, even though there is no underlying physical cause. It is, in essence, a collective nervous system breakdown, a shared physical expression of a shared unbearable mental burden. It often begins with one person, an individual, perhaps more vulnerable or suggestible than the rest, begins to exhibit a strange symptom. In this case, Frau Trophea begins to dance. Others see her. And in their stressed, suggestible state, her behavior acts as a trigger. Their own pent-up anxiety, fear, and despair find a sudden physical outlet. Their brains, in a way, see this strange behavior and unconsciously decide, this is what we do now. This is how we express this feeling. And so the contagion spreads, not like a virus passed through the air, but like an idea passed from mind to mind through the power of suggestion. It is the logic of a nightmare. In a dream, one strange event can lead to another without question. In a state of mass psychogenesis, the same thing can happen in waking life. The sight of others dancing becomes a powerful suggestion that you should dance too. The community's shared belief that this is a real unstoppable affliction makes it so. The mind, in a desperate attempt to cope with overwhelming psychological pain, can sometimes create a physical reality that is just as powerful and just as dangerous. The dancing was not a conscious choice, but it may have been a subconscious release valve for a community that had reached its absolute breaking point. This is not as rare as it may sound. History is dotted with similar strange events. There have been recorded incidents of laughing epidemics where entire villages were gripped by uncontrollable and ultimately painful fits of laughter. There have been fainting plagues in schools and factories. There was even, in the Middle Ages, a phenomenon of meowing nuns, where a convent of nuns began to meow like cats for hours on end, an episode that only ended when they were threatened with physical punishment. In each case, the pattern is similar. A closed, high-stress community, a trigger event, and a rapid, unconscious spread of a physical symptom. The human mind, when pushed to its limits, is a mysterious and powerful thing. It can endure incredible hardship, but it can also shatter in the most unexpected ways. So perhaps the dancing plague of 1518 was not caused by a fungus in the bread, but by a poison in the soul. A poison of fear of famine, of hopelessness. Perhaps the dance was a desperate, convulsive, and ultimately fatal attempt by a community to physically exorcise a psychological demon that had grown too large to bear. It was a fever of the mind which became a fire in the body. Let us turn one final page in this book of old mysteries. Let us consider one more possibility, a whisper that comes from the very edges of the historical record. It is a more controversial theory, one with less evidence, but one that paints the events of 1518 in a completely different and perhaps even more intriguing light. This theory suggests that the dancing plague was not a disease at all, not of the body, and not of the mind. What if it asks it was a choice? What if the dancing was in fact a deliberate act? What if it was a ritual? Let us remember the world of 1518. The official state-sanctioned religion was a powerful and controlling force. The Catholic Church governed not only the spiritual lives of the people, but also their social and political lives. To deviate from its doctrines, to question its authority, was to risk being branded a heretic. And the punishment for heresy was often brutal and absolute. But beneath the surface of official religion, older beliefs, pre-Christian traditions, and secret, ecstatic religious practices sometimes survived. These were the remnants of folk religions, of pagan rituals that had been driven underground by the church. These groups often sought connection with the divine, not through quiet prayer and solemn mass, but through ecstatic states, through chanting, through fasting, and sometimes through trance-like dancing. This theory proposes that the dancers of Strasbourg were not victims of a plague, but members of one such secret heretical sect. In their desperation facing famine and disease, perhaps they turned away from the official church, which seemed to offer no comfort, and returned to an older, forbidden form of worship. Perhaps their dance was a planned, ritualistic appeal to a forgotten god or spirit, a desperate, ecstatic prayer intended to bring rain, to heal the sick, or to simply achieve a state of spiritual transcendence, a brief escape from their miserable reality. The dance in this context was not an affliction, it was a tool, a path to the divine. If this were the case, it would explain why the official accounts are so strange. The city authorities and the church, upon discovering this massive public display of heretical worship, would have been horrified. They could not allow it to be seen as a legitimate religious act, so they would have needed to reframe it. They would have needed to label it as something else, as a sickness, a madness, a plague. By calling it a disease, they could strip the dancers of their agency. They were not heretics making a conscious choice. They were simply poor, sick victims. This would allow the authorities to control the narrative, to quell the rebellion, without having to resort to a massive, bloody public persecution, which could have sparked even more unrest. The cure of hiring musicians and building a stage could be seen in this light, not as a medical treatment, but as a cynical attempt to co-opt and control the ritual, to absorb it into a public spectacle that the authorities could manage and ultimately shut down. The final act of sending the dancers to the shrine of St. Vitus would then be the final step in this reframing. The heretical ritual was officially reconsecrated as an act of penance to a Christian saint. The story was rewritten, the original purpose of the dance erased, and the official narrative of a strange medical plague was cemented into the historical record. It is a compelling thought, a story of spiritual rebellion, of a desperate hidden faith community whose most sacred ritual was misinterpreted or perhaps deliberately mislabeled as a disease. But we must be careful. This is, as I said, a whisper from the margins. There is no direct written evidence to support it. There are no surviving texts from a secret dancing cult. There is only the strange nature of the events themselves and the gaps and contradictions in the official story. It remains a tantalizing but unproven possibility, a ghost of a theory haunting the edges of the accepted explanation. It serves to remind us that history is not always what it seems, and that the stories told by the victors or the authorities are not always the whole truth. And so we are left with these echoes, these competing whispers from the past. A poison in the rye, a fever in the mind, a secret forbidden ritual. Each theory offers a key, but no single key seems to unlock the entire mystery. Perhaps the truth is not one of these things, but a complex, tragic alchemy of all three. Imagine a population weakened by hunger, their bodies already on the edge of collapse. Imagine their daily bread. Their only source of sustenance is tainted with a low-level neurotoxin, just enough to create a sense of unease, a nervous energy, a feeling of being unwell. Now, add to that a deep, pervasive psychological stress, a spiritual dread so profound it feels like the world is ending. The people are a tinderbox of anxiety waiting for a spark. And then that spark ignites. Perhaps it is a woman, Frau Trophea, who is particularly susceptible to the poison or particularly overwhelmed by despair. Or perhaps she is the leader of a small, ecstatic group who decides the time has come for a public ritual. She begins to dance, and in that moment, all the threads converge. Her strange movements are seen by others whose poisoned, stressed out minds are highly suggestible. The power of psychological contagion takes hold. The ritual, if it was one, is hijacked by a wave of mass hysteria. The disease, if it was one, is amplified by a deep spiritual crisis. The truth, most likely, is not a simple answer. It is a messy, complex, and deeply human tragedy, where biology, psychology, and faith collided in a perfect, terrible storm. In the end, we may never know for certain what truly happened in Strasbourg in the summer of 1518. The real definitive truth was lost with the last breath of the last dancer. It was buried with them in the unconsecrated ground, their stories untold, their suffering remembered only as a bizarre and frightening spectacle. And perhaps that is how it should be. Perhaps some mysteries are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be contemplated. They are meant to stand as quiet, humble reminders that we do not have all the answers. They remind us that the past is a foreign country, a place with different rules, different fears, and different truths. The story of the dancing plague is a haze, a historical dream. And as we sit here in the comfort and safety of our own time, we can only look back into that haze with a sense of wonder, of pity, and of profound humility. The truth is lost, and all that remains is the story and the silence that followed. And so, the strange, hot summer of 1518 wore on. The pilgrimage to the mountain shrine of St. Vitus had been made. Prayers had been offered. Rituals had been performed. And back in Strasbourg, the people waited. And then, as mysteriously as it had begun, the fever began to break. It did not end in a single dramatic moment. There was no clap of thunder, no miraculous sign from the heavens. It was more like a slow, gradual receding of a tide. A great invisible tension that had held the city in its grip for weeks began at long last to release. In the squares and streets among the remaining dancers, the frantic energy started to wane. The movements, which had been so violent and incessant, became slower, more listless. The wild jerks softened into weary twitches. The frantic spinning subsided into a slow, unsteady swaying. One by one, the last of the dancers began to fall. But this time, it was different. They did not collapse from the sudden final trauma of a heart attack or a stroke. They simply gave out. Their bodies, having been pushed far beyond the limits of human endurance, finally reached the end of their kinetic rope. They crumpled to the ground, not as corpses, but as puppets whose strings had finally been cut. And there on the hard, dusty cobblestones, they did something they had not been able to do for days or even weeks. They fell asleep. It was not a gentle drifting off. It was a profound and sudden oblivion. A sleep so deep and so immediate, it was like a small death in itself. Their bodies finally granted a reprieve from the tyrannical dance, surrendered completely to exhaustion. Their ragged breathing softened evening out into the slow, steady rhythm of deep, restorative sleep. They lay where they fell, a scattered collection of still forms, finally at peace, their long ordeal seemingly over. Over the next several days, this quiet, sleepy peace spread through the remaining few. The last twitching limb grew still. The last shuffling foot came to rest. The terrible, silent music that had haunted the city for a month finally faded away completely. The dance was over, and Strasbourg, the city that had been holding its breath, slowly, tentatively began to exhale. The change was subtle at first, a single wooden shutter creaking open, a face pale and cautious peering out into the street. Seeing the stillness, the quiet another shutter would open, a door would unbolt. Life began to seep back into the city's veins. The sound of the blacksmith's hammer returned hesitant at first, then stronger, more confident. The rhythmic clang was no longer a sound of commerce, but a sound of survival, a sound of normalcy. The bakeries opened their doors. The fires in the great stone ovens were relit, and soon the warm, life-affirming scent of baking bread once again drifted through the alleyways, a fragrance that now seemed more precious than ever before. It was the smell of a city returning to life. The market slowly refilled. People began to talk to one another again, their voices low and hushed at first, sharing stories, mourning the lost, and trying to make sense of the nightmare they had all just endured. The city had survived, but it was not the same. It was a city wounded, a city haunted. A deep, invisible scar had been carved into its collective memory. Every citizen now carried the knowledge of how fragile their world was, how quickly order could descend into chaos, how easily the human mind and body could be broken. The summer of 1518 would be whispered about for generations to come. A dark fairy tale, a local legend, a chilling reminder of the time the music stopped and the terrible dancing began. The fever was gone, but the silence it left behind was filled with ghosts. And now it is time for us to leave this city of ghosts. Let us take one last look at the quiet streets of Strasbourg, now healing under the late summer sun. And let us gently, quietly take our leave. Let the image of the cobblestones and the timber-framed houses begin to soften, to dissolve like mist. Let the memory of the dancers fade not into forgetting, but into the gentle, respectful distance of the past. The story is over. Their struggle is done. And we can let them rest. Slowly, gently begin to bring your awareness back from that distant time and that distant place, back into your own body, lying here now. Feel the space around you. Become aware once more of the familiar comforts of your own room. Feel the solid reality of the bed beneath you, holding you, supporting you completely. Notice the texture of the blanket against your skin. The weight of it, a gentle, reassuring presence. Feel the soft pillow cradling your head. This is your space, your sanctuary, a place of profound safety and peace. Let us feel the stillness in our own bodies, a chosen stillness, a welcome rest. Feel how wonderful it is to be in control of your own limbs, to be able to lie perfectly still without any force compelling you to move. to feel your muscles not burning with a frantic energy, but soft, relaxed, and at ease. It is a simple gift, this gift of stillness, but it is a profound one. In our world, a dance is a thing of joy. It is an expression of celebration, of connection, of freedom. We go to weddings, to parties, to concerts, and we choose to move our bodies to music because it feels good. It is a release. It is a pleasure. And most importantly, we can choose when to begin, and we can choose when to stop. When we are tired, we can simply find a chair or go home to our comfortable beds and rest. Our bodies are our own. If we feel unwell, if our bodies feel strange or in pain, we do not need to fear the wrath of an angry saint. We have a world of knowledge at our fingertips. We have doctors we can consult whose understanding of the human body is built upon centuries of careful scientific discovery. We have remedies and medicines that can soothe our pain, fight our infections, and bring our bodies back into balance. And if our minds feel troubled, if we are burdened by a stress or a sadness that feels too large to bear, we do not have to suffer in silence. We have a language for these struggles. We have an understanding of psychology, of trauma, of the delicate and wonderful workings of the human mind. We can seek comfort. We can find counsel. We can share our burdens. We know that our mental anguish is not a moral failing or a divine punishment. It is simply a part of the human experience. We are so very fortunate, are we not, to live in a time of such knowledge, such comfort, such safety. To have the luxury of a quiet room, a safe bed, and a mind that is free to rest. Stories like the one from Strasbourg are not meant to frighten us. They are here to serve as gentle, hazy reminders. They remind us of the incredible resilience of the people who came before us, who endured worlds of hardship we can barely imagine. They remind us of the profound and enduring mystery of the human mind, its fragility and its power. And most of all, they remind us to be grateful. Grateful for the simple, quiet, and wonderful peace of this very moment. Grateful for the ability to close our eyes, to take a slow breath, and to simply be still, to be at rest. And now, my dear friend, there is nothing left to do. The story is over. The journey is complete. We have walked the dusty streets of the past, and we have returned safely to the quiet harbor of the present. And all that remains is rest. There is no more dancing now. There is only the stillness, a deep and profound stillness that begins at the tips of your toes and flows like a warm, gentle river all the way up to the crown of your head. Feel this stillness in your feet finally at peace. Feel it in your legs, heavy and relaxed. There is no need for them to move. Their only job now is to rest. There is no more fear now. There is only peace, a quiet and gentle peace that settles over you like the softest, warmest blanket. Let this peace soothe your mind. Let it smooth away the last lingering thoughts of the day. Any worries that remain can now drift away. Watch them as they float off like tiny boats on a calm, dark sea, sailing away into the distance, leaving only tranquility behind. You are safe. You are at peace. There is no more struggle now. There is only surrender, a gentle surrender to the wonderful healing power of sleep. Your body knows what to do. Your mind is ready to let go. You can allow yourself to sink deeper and deeper into the comfort of your bed. With every slow breath you exhale, you can feel yourself sinking just a little bit more, sinking into softness, sinking into darkness, sinking into sleep. The dance is done. And now there is only rest. The fear is gone. And now there is only peace. The story has ended. And now your time for dreaming begins. Let your body be heavy. Let your breathing be slow and even. Let your mind be quiet. There is nothing to hold on to, nothing to figure out, nothing to do but to let go and drift. Drift on the gentle waves of your own breathing. Each breath in is a wave of calm. Each breath out is a release of all that is heavy. Breathing in peace and breathing out tension. Breathing in calm and breathing out worry. Breathing in stillness and breathing out the day. The city of Strasbourg is far away now, a distant dream. The people of that time are at rest. And now you too can be at rest. There are no more stories to tell tonight. There is only the quiet invitation of sleep. There is no more need to listen to my voice. You can let it fade away now, just a gentle murmur in the distance. Your mind can be quiet. Your body can be still. Allow yourself to drift and to dream. The story is over. And tonight, you are allowed to rest. You have earned this rest. Sleep well, my dear friend. Sleep deeply and have the most peaceful, gentle dreams. Good night.